Hey guys, it's Dan here, Dansmonsters for a Dan Ramble. What am I going to talk about today? Well, I'd like to talk to you about one of my art heroes, Bernie Wrightson, who I discovered on the Isle of Arran off the west coast of Scotland. Bear with me on this, okay? So I had seen Wrightson's work a lot earlier, but I never realised it was him, if that makes any sense. We used to be able to get here in the UK random copies of the sort of DC's House of Secrets, House of Mystery, a Weird Mystery, and he did a lot of covers and some artwork inside for that. But also we used to get random copies of the Warren magazines, Creepy Eerie, Vampirella, that we just stumbled across occasionally. But, you know, they were pretty difficult to get hold of until the sort of comics boom started. And this guy knew how to draw monsters, and as I've always been fascinated by him, I was completely transfixed. So why did I discover him on the Isle of Arran? Well, I was on a field trip way back in 1985. 15 years old. We were away for a whole week on the Isle of Arran for a school geology trip. It was the first time I had spent any time away from my parents. And we stayed in some like old barrack style freezing cold huts. I think they must have been prisoner camps or something. They're like wooden bunk beds, breeze block walls, no real heating, like one single tiny glass window. And I do remember we had some amazing, stunning days on the beach, but we also had some dreadful apocalyptic weather whilst we were searching for these geological rock compositions. But a hell of a time, I've got to say, from what I remember. It was just a bunch of kids let loose from the parents for the first time, and I have the fondest memories of the trip. And it also still have a fascination for geology to this day. Igneous rock, lung rock, hematite. Anyway, that's another thing. But so in between us jumping around rocks, looking at rock floor, we were obviously allowed a bit of free time. And as this camp was about, I don't know, maybe a 20-minute walk into Brodick, which is the town centre on the Isle of Arran, it was an easy walk. So we would go off when we had a bit of free time to go and spend the money our parents had given us to buy pop or candy, as you Americans would call it, sweets, and goof around. Now, I can't say that I remember the bookshop we visited. I don't even know if it's still there. It's been a while since I've been, but I think it was a bit of a selling everything. It had pens and paper and sweets and stuff like that, but it had a really big book section. And it being the 80s, the paperback horror craze had gone massive. You know, those brilliant, gory, really well illustrated covers were just fascinating us. And of course, we're in the era of the videotape as well, and a lot of horror films were being banned, or we'd seen them before they got banned. So horror was a big thing, certainly for me and for some of my pals. Locally, we had a W.H. Smith's that sold books to where I lived, and we also had another bookshop called Sweetens, where we would buy these books with Sean Hudson, Guy N. Smith, James Herbert, and of course Stephen King. Anyway, they had a big selection of these books in this shop, so we thought, let's have a look. And that's where I saw it. On a table, laying out Cycle of the Werewolf. This sort of weird, just under A4 size paperback book with a little picture of a werewolf on it, really thin. And I was like, what the hell is that? I loved werewolves. I'd seen American Werewolf in London, I think, at this point. I can't quite remember, but werewolves were a thing. I loved Legend of the Werewolf, and I loved Curse of the Werewolf, Hammer movie. Curse of the Werewolf with Oliver Reed. I was not a big fan of Stephen King, but however, once I opened that book and was faced with those eye-popping, gory images, I was like, whoa, I'm having this. The very image of that policeman having his face torn open by the werewolf sticks in my brain to this day. And I remember spending the majority of my money, $4.95, I think it retails about 20 quid now, to buy it. I was also convinced that that book was so violent the shop would not let me buy it. But they did. Woo! Which was good for me. And I think my pals thought I was a bit nuts to be spending my money on this book. Buying a book instead of Curly Whirlies and Iron Brew. What was I thinking? Anyway, the paper bag, sealed it up, sellotaped it up. As soon as I got back to the huts, I cracked it open and had a look through it. And I was amazed. Popped it back in, left it, thought, I cannot wait to get back home for this. As soon as I got back home, I read through it again. And I tried to copy all the pictures inside it. Failed abysmally. Who was this guy? I must have just gone through it over and over and over again, copying the best that I could over and over again. I just couldn't do it, but it was amazing. I needed to find out more. I even used the book for an English literature project. I was a strange kid and nobody knew what I was talking about, but it was incredible. And of course, I couldn't search him. We didn't have any internet at that time. Anyway, about a year or so later, my brother, who's about 3-4 years older than me, had been on one of his sort of shopping trips to Manchester, and he came home with some of the Roots of the Swamp Thing, which DC had reprinted, which Wrightson had done along with Len Wein. Anyway, the comic boom had kicked off, obviously, and Alan Moore had taken over the title, and it had gone to the stratosphere, so of course they were republishing it all. And I was just like, I couldn't get enough of them. It was just incredible. Oh my God. Anyway, my love for him continued, and I could try and find anything that I could. But, you know, there weren't so many comics coming out, really. I mean, there were lots of comics coming out, but you didn't see a lot of Wrightson's work. It was certainly not in this country. It was when I moved to Liverpool several years later, and I met some of my best friends of all time that I still see today. And they knew who Bernie Wrightson was. And my friend Chris, he was the manager of Forbidden Planet. He was my boss at HMV, and then he moved to Forbidden Planet to be the manager, and he let me know everything that was coming out. The trading card craze started, and he said, Dan, there's Bernie Wrightson trading cards coming out. Oh my lord, gotta have them. Then he got me the art book, he got me the pop-up book, any comics that were coming out, he would head towards me. Batman vs Aliens, which wasn't that good to be fair. Batman the Cult, again, it was alright. And then his tour de force Chris got me, the hardback version of his Frankenstein book. This book is incredible. If you ever get the chance to get hold of it, do. It is an absolute dream. I believe Guillermo del Toro has got maybe 4 of the original pieces from him. They're really hard to come by, obviously. Just outstanding. Anyway, I still have the original Cycle of the Werewolf book that I bought that day. Apologies to Stephen King, and I don't think that book would be half as good without Bernie Wrightson's Werewolves. And this book is still one of the originals from my original book collection. I got rid of lots of books when I moved house, sold a lot of them, gave a lot to charity shops. I am full of regret for that because I'm spending most of my time trying to get them back. Anyway. That one I kept for whatever reason. I think it's just because I loved it so much. So ever since, Wrightson's work has always been a big influence. On my drawing desk, I have about 5 or 6 of the trading cards pinned up so I can look at when I'm drawing for inspiration. I've still got the sets of cards. I've obviously got his book. I mean, this guy knew how to draw and worked in just about every industry. I mean, not only did he work for obviously Warren, and he did the illustrations for the Stephen King stuff, but he worked for Marvel, he worked for DC, he worked for Dark Horse, he drew the poster for Stephen King's Creepshow, Stephen King George Romero's Creepshow, and he illustrated the comic book adaptation. And his zombie drawings were the main thing that inspired the special effects crew on the Walking Dead. And he even worked on Ghostbusters. I mean, you know, the guy was just a genius. And my love for the macabre and the gruesome had no doubt been fueled by his stellar work. And I wish I'd been lucky enough to meet him and let him know how important he was to this weird 15-year-old kid who loved werewolves and monsters. Unfortunately, after a battle with cancer, Bernie passed away on the 18th of March 2017 at the age of 68. An absolute loss to the art world, and I think probably one of the greatest popular culture artists that have ever existed, along with people like Richard Corbin and what have you. So anyway, Mr. Wrightson, if you can hear me anywhere, thanks from the very bottom of my heart and my ink-stained fingers. You were the best. Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening. If you did, I hope you liked it. Check out Dan's Monsters on Patreon. Check out Dan's Monsters on Instagram. There's a lot of free stuff up on there on the Patreon, but if you feel like you could pay, it's from £1.50. Anything would be great. I'm glad you're here along for the ride, and I hope you're enjoying these. Or if you want me to pack up, tell me. It might be crap. Ooh. Anyway, thanks very much, guys. Leave you later. Speak to you soon. All right. Bye.